Wallace is a violence interrupter. Pastor Rich Redmond is the research area editor for the media editing group, MEG. Thank you all for joining us. This is going to be a great conversation. I want to start with Pastor Redmond. What is the media editing group, and tell me about the Family Value Initiative?
Oh, it sure will. And I thank you, Will, for having us, WLS, and you're giving us this opportunity to discuss the values that we are looking at, and particularly the work that Meg is doing, and those here on the panel who have joined in to help make the Family Value Initiative a good start and a good becoming reality. The media editing group actually is a 11-year-old organization. We have worked with television news, and we basically look at news on an ongoing basis. It's a three-pronged organization. First is built with volunteers who every day for the last 11 years have documented news reports on all 5 Chicago TV news stations. They cover the high-rated newscast hours, 6, 9, and 10. They also have built a database by which we can research the news, and the reason for that is simply to critique it. That's the second group. The second group who critiques it are former TV news department workers, former and retired. I'm such a person who once worked at the Grand WLS television back in the 80s. Hello, partner, on the assignment desk. And these individuals look at the news documented by the volunteers and make assessments. And they do a critique and documentation. The third group of the media editing is the community and organizations. We have here with us today 2 individuals who decided to chair this. They are volunteers like myself, and they're here in the form of Pastor James and Pastor Hood. Pastor James oversees the pastoral church group. We have over 225 churches throughout the Cook County area, covering most of the DMA, that is designated marketing area of the TV stations. And then we have Pastor Hood, who's chair of the community groups throughout Cook County. And he works with them to make sure that we are in touch with their programs and the things they do, and look at the type of coverage they're getting. Now, I must stipulate something here in regards to organizations that's working with us. Media Editing Group is the author of the Family Value. We work with no other organizations. Most organizations working with us are already established. Those who are doing similar work are people who come to us to see what coverage we have of the work they're doing and what type of news coverage they receive from the television stations. We're kind of like the resource that they can count on to know that if they got coverage, we probably will have it in our library. It doesn't mean that we are asked them to be a part of the Family Value. That is totally a MEG Inside initiative. So we have 2 other panelists here who would be speaking from their own work, organization, and their efforts to address what deals with the family and violence. We consult these 2 individuals on this panel, Dr. Phillips and Reverend Wallace, to get information in their work. And we just want to make that point clear, because while the MEG works with everyone and everyone loves to work with MEG, we do have separate programs. the difference between, and finally here on the last note, the difference between family value and other programs is that Meg wrote this program to look directly at the family, to look at their role and how we can encourage family participation into curbing the violence on the streets. It's the saying that it takes a village to raise a child. When we studied that and saw what the other organizations were doing, they were basically working on what we call strategists such as myself will call an outside perimeter. They were addressing concerns to the community and asking for more so community participation. Well, the media editing group thought that there was a step missing. Before you can have a village, you must have a family. And we decided to go with that as our first step and ask that the family take on a proactive role. No one knows any child, any person who would care to have a lifestyle, be it street, be it of against an element against lawlessness, but anything that deals with their efforts to carry out an act. You have someone who knows them better than law enforcement. You have someone who knows them better than even the community organizations, someone that knows them better than the legal system. And that someone is usually within their family structure. They grew up with them, they know them, they can look at them and tell, I mean, they don't have to do a survey on them or run some type of litmus test. They can basically tell your own. I could tell my children. I have 2 boys. I watched them grow up. I have brothers. I have a sister. One of my brothers was killed. He was out in the streets living the life, and he was in a gang. He was 17 years old. And it hurt me to know that as I was talking with him, he wasn't listening to me. But there is a cousin of mine who he would have listened to, who happened not to be around. I'm saying that family can talk to family. Family value is very important in asking the question, what is the value of your family member to you personally? So that we can deal with that. So that's basically the crux of everything in regards to family value. We're going to talk more about other points, but that's an introduction I hope will give the viewers a good understanding of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Dr. Phillips, and I want to bring you in, and other panelists can chime in as well. Last year was a violent year. I worked Saturday and Sunday nights, and oftentimes I spent them at crime scenes. Nearly 800 homicides in the city of Chicago last year. When you talk about family values, what type of conversation do you want parents, aunties, uncles, grandmas, grandpas to have with their loved ones about violence?
Yeah, well, thank you. And that's a very good question. One thing we have to remember in working in the city of Chicago is that the city of Chicago is not unique to large cities. All the cities in the country, at least the top 15, have experienced increase in violence, increase in deaths. I think it was the American Associated Press that came out in December with a statistic of 3 million people across the United States that actually will die, right? So in this year, it was announced that Chicago was the #1 place or #1 city in the country for deaths due to homicide, due to shootings. One thing we want to talk to our families about this year, and it's a strategy that we're going to be using across the city, I believe, is one thing. Let's not make 2020 define us. 2020 cannot define who we are as a community, who we are as a city. Okay, that's one thing we want to leave them with. The second thing is that we as community-based organizations, we have to go deeper into our communities and start working with families on a one-on-one basis. We normally are on the street at will, as you know, our organizations are on the street doing street level intervention. And we work with the most high-risk individuals in the communities. One thing that we're pushing this year is with our community-based organization is to start dealing and working with what's called parent and youth mentoring. That's going to be a really essential part of helping us to bring down the violence in our communities. Target area, the organization that I'm over, we work in 3 to 4 different communities across the city. We're considered a citywide organization, but that piece right there of mentoring parents and their children and identifying opportunities where we can assist and working with them to bring down or to help them with barriers that's causing them to have conflicts within the community, within the house, that spread to the community. Domestic violence is another area that we're going to be working in, and family values. It's interesting that domestic violence is directly related to the number of shootings and homicides that's on the street. So if we can get mom and dad and the nucleus of the family to start working together more closely, to start building a better relationship inside the house, we believe that is going to spill over into the street. We believe that if we work on the family issues inside the house, if we work on employment, if we work on getting back kids getting back in school, if we're working on a continuing education, mental health, those issues that are in the family, we believe that that's going to help stem the violence in 2021. Well, I can talk a lot, but I'm not.
And anyone else want to chime in on that point about how do you address the violence? How do families get involved and make sure they know what is going on with specifically the young people?
So Mother Opposed to Violence Everywhere has some children called Youth Opposed to Violence Everywhere. And we've been working with youth for about a decade now, mostly through after school programs and summer jobs. So what we've done with them, we kept them engaged about the community. We kept them working. One of the things we did pre-COVID was we had the kids to go right back outside to the streets that they were hiding from. In other words, we had them doing organizing work and just asking people what they think need to be changes in the community. We also got them focused on the housing needs in the community. So if you engage the youth that way, if you engage them in education, the chances are you got an opportunity to actually get into the household and you could begin to find out what's needed in the homes. And what we learned over the years, and I'm sure Pastor Phillips and the other pastors will agree with me, what you can find out, you got like 54% young African American men that are unemployed. It's probably 80% now because of COVID, but that has been a problem for decades in the city of Chicago. Unemployment is a key barrier to violence. The second thing is education. If you got a good school, you get a good education, and your chances are greater of getting better employment. So staying and connected with the youth and the family brings about change and less violence.
And Reverend Wallace,
Yes.
when you encounter these young people who are trying lives around or are in the midst of involvement in gang activity, what do you say to them?
Well, first off, I think Archie kind of spreaded it, across the table near. I think the first thing that we need to look at is building trust, because it's not about what I say, it's my actions toward them. And so even in that trust, it's the relationship. More so listening and making inclusive statements where we're involving them. Because a lot of times, we can talk so loud that people don't even hear us. And oftentimes we're so forceful in wanting people to come into our territory or in our, boundaries, that we force them or we push them further away. And so in doing so, what I do as far as the violence interrupter is that I pretty much, ask the people or ask these individuals and what they're looking for. What are their endeavors? What are their goals? And try to meet them where they are. Coming from a ministerial standpoint, we're taught to, in terms of family value, to deal with this compassion and, what are your beliefs, and not so much in a religious standpoint, but what do you believe is to be true? What do you believe is to be right? And then when you get them to understand where they fall under that category, then you build that relationship and you move forward with them. I know something that was brought up earlier on in terms of family value, on curbing violence. I think first of all, we need to get back to the basics. And getting back to the basics says that Archie, Mr. Phillips made a great insight on what happens in the household. When we were coming up out in the streets, or rather in our neighborhoods or whatever, there was certain things that we weren't allowed to do, and there were certain things that we were allowed to do, whether parents were around or not. And so in terms of family value, there were times where we were able to go out and hang out on the street corners or, do whatever. And then, your neighbors would be able to correct you if you were doing things wrong. And I think that some things that we need to get back to as far as the basics go is building back that structure. And so building that structure with the youth says that I have to not only come from a telling point, but come from also a showing point, that I have to show them what it looks like to be better than what you are. Now, we all understand that, mental health plays a major key. And I don't understand and may not have fallen into the category in which this individual may be in, but I have to displace myself from where I am to also stand in their shoes.
Reverend James, what are you seeing out on the streets when you talk to parents and when you talk to the young people? What are they experiencing?
Well, one of the things that they're experiencing, our young people nowadays on the streets, we talk to them on the street. A lot of them have no hope. A lot of the young people that you talk to, young men, they don't even think that they'll see tomorrow. They're living for today, only. They're saying that, look, I'm 19, I'm 20 years old, and I'm not even sure if I'm gonna make it to tomorrow. So when you lose hope, that's a major problem. One of the things I think that Reverend Wallace had brought up about relationships. One, we used to have what we call shared family values. Shared family values have dissipated and disappeared now. The value system has changed and been eroded. And what we have to do is build that back up. It used to be there was a respect that our youth had for adults. They had a respect for the elders. They had respect for the church. A friend of mine, the other year, his church, 2 individuals were shot and killed on his church steps. There was a time that there was enough respect for the houses of worship and for persons of elders and individuals that was not even considered. But one of the things that's happened is we've lost those values. And as a result, this the value system that we now have has caused persons to be targeted with regards to whether they're with their family or not. That was another thing. You didn't bother a person's family. But all of that has since disappeared from the scene. And we have an increased violence. We have increased shootings and killings because we've lost what was once essential and basic in our community. And until we can bring that back where we're concerned about one another, and the question becomes, how do you do that? We talk to individuals all the time because when individuals get shot, get killed, get hospitalized, we're the ones as pastors in the community that are relating to those families, having to do the funerals if someone's killed, and having to comfort them and console them through this entire ordeal. So Those are the things we run across regularly. And I'm certain I can speak for all of the pastors and preachers that are on here. We are involved with that all the time. And we're tired of going to the cemetery. We're tired of burying folks, young people. That's that's generations that are being destroyed. Not just one, but generations. Those individuals that would have children, those children will never come on the scene. Had my father been destroyed by violence, I wouldn't have been here. And there were 12 of us, none of us would have been here. That eliminates generation after generation. So we have to give thought to that and be concerned about our present and our future.
You kind of highlighted the street code, that it has changed over the decades. I often hear when I'm covering crime that decades ago, no one would touch an elderly person. No one would touch a kid. And I just remember back in July, I think there was a stretch where every Saturday it was a 1-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 3-year-old. Mm-hmm. And one of your PSAs, Pastor, dealt with kid victims. That is important for you all to do.
Sorry, Will, look like we're breaking up a bit.
So I was saying that one of your PSAs that ran over the holidays or on a variety of networks here in Chicago dealt with young victims of violence.
Yes, sir.
What message were you sending with that PSA?
Well, there was a number of victims. There was and all of them had one central theme to them: unattended. You know, when we do news reports, we make that mention often as a descriptive to say what the scene is, the victim of the scene was, and or what involved that. And the word unattended is used regularly. And unfortunately, that goes to a few things. They are with someone who is the attendant. That's the first thing. Some examples I have used in the past, and one most recently was the grandmother here 3 weeks ago, who happened to be, her home was shot up and she was killed. But the home was shot up because her grandson, who comes in and out of the home, had rivals looking for him. And they identified where he was going. And they came after him and didn't care, I guess, who they shot, just shot up the home. Little girl, teen girl, happened to be on the porch with her brother, who had ties and gang ties, and drive by. She's killed. He's not. And we heard reports like that over and over again. And as I was doing the research, I wanted to know how many of these victims were because of someone else. And that I received from Chicago Police Department as one source, is that most of those had family around them. Over the early summer, the 7-year-old who was killed was there with her family. Janari, out on the near north side, happened to be let out after 2 weeks. His mother kept him in the house because of fear of violence. The one time she lets him out, he's shot and killed. So we just thought we can't blame the family. We never want to blame family for the actions of their members, but we need to get ahead of the curve. So the message that not only we were sending to the young, but to the family as a unit, is that this talk could possibly save the life of that child you have suspicion of living that life, and it definitely could save someone in your family. Have the talk. Let's be proactive. We keep reacting to these things. And that's another thing we saw in the program, is that all of them were reactionaries to what has already happened. But we need to get ahead of the curve. And as Pastor Phillips was saying, as Reverend Wallace was saying, as I know Pastor Hood, who's out there working with the young people, and he could add to this, how they react to things is totally different from us adults, but at the same time, they're willing to learn if you got the right person. And I say, grandma was a big influence on my life. And I've heard it all the time from our kind of people. Yeah, grandma, big mama, you know. So we need to get back, like Reverend Wallace says, we got to get back to the basics. We can't rely on society to solve the problems of our own. And I'm just a belief that, in fact, I will step out on the limb and say, because I prayed on it so much, I know God is not misleading me. This will work. Talk to each other. In the killing, I don't want to see another summer of children dying.
It's very emotional. I actually covered the killing of 9-year-old Janari Ricks near the old Cabrini Green, and it was just very devastating for me to see so many of his friends crying. And I often wonder about those kids and how that has changed them and what they're going to do going forward after that. I can't imagine losing a friend at 9 years old just outside playing. And part of your family value initiative is talking about consequences. And there are consequences to crime. Victims' friends, loved ones, family members are devastated. The perpetrators' families are devastated. Their families will never be the same. Sometimes fathers are taken away from their kids because of an act that they did. Could you all speak to more of what you're trying to communicate to families about the consequences of violence?
We haven't got to that point yet, but what we're thinking about doing is a whole education piece around what happens if you commit a gun crime. And especially what's going on today, women and girls are getting shot in record numbers like never before. Goes back to what Pastor James was saying. Some things are missing in the community. People are getting carjacked, and mostly by kids. Well, these kids don't know what kind of time they can get. These kids don't understand that if you pick up a gun out of anger through retaliation, that you're gonna mess up your whole family. They don't understand that. So I think it's incumbent on us to educate our not only our churches but our community. What could be the results for committing these crimes? So it's all about educating people about what can happen to them.
Pastor Hood, let me jump in real quick. One thing, guys, too, and I hope that, and I pray, and I know that you guys agree with me, is that we have to have what's called credible messengers.
There you go.
In the community, that other people actually will listen to. In order for us to stem the violence in Chicago, we have to have individuals that are from where they are. Now, just an example. If Will and I went to Inglewood and we tried to stop some violence over in Inglewood, try to stop two people from fighting, it may not turn out. It may not turn out well. But if that person who is living on that block every day, and those two individuals who are about to fight see that person every day, he becomes a credible messenger. He becomes someone that he can trust, someone that he can look up to. And if he says, hey, look, that's not the best way to go, we have to start building credibility in the families again, where that block will have individuals on that block that can monitor the block. And if we can do one block, we can get to the next block and start, and then we can get eventually across the whole city of Chicago, one block at a time. But the family values and bringing back credibility to the families is important.
So,
Yes, sir.
so if I may join in and chime in just for a few minutes here, uh, Pastor Phillips made mention to speaking in terms of blocks. So, with me being a violence interrupter, what we came up with, and Pastor Phillips kind of knows about this as well. We created this initiative, for lack of title, Flip Workers. Flip Workers is that we take a certain neighborhood that's impacted with violence on a high. We take this certain neighborhood and we take those individuals who are out normally on corners, just standing out there just because, or doing something that they shouldn't be doing, or we think they shouldn't be doing. And we take those individuals and we utilize them. We offer them jobs. We create jobs for them. So what the job is that you stand out and you help curb the violence. Is that so? We're paying you to stand out and keep the violence down in your neighborhood, opposed to you standing out and you may be doing other things that may not be helping to encourage the neighborhood. And so Flip Workers, they we've done this for well over, I think, 2 years now, right, Archie?
Yes.
And so what we're doing now, not only to help them create jobs, this also in the future would help create them an atmosphere of knowing what it is to have a job, right? Learning to appreciate a paycheck, because oftentimes we, in my conversation that I have with a lot of guys on the streets, is that they've never had a job, never had an opportunity. And so even in being a flip worker, we teach them, methods of creating resumes and what it's like to sit in interviews and things of that nature. Because oftentimes I hear all the time that I've never been given the opportunity. Not that it's an excuse, but opportunity don't come just as well as it would come in some suburb for, the inner city. And so having been one of those individuals, for me, I've been very fortunate, having come from that background and having lived the lifestyle. I thought about when you made mention to about the youth doing what they were doing or not understanding pastorhood, but I also thought about in having those conversations about some of those individuals whom I've spoken with. Some of those individuals who may have committed crimes and things of that nature are very outraged within themselves, but some of them just don't know how to deal with it. And so I think what we need to do overall from a ministerial standpoint, and, those of us who are trying to, press the Force for Peace initiative, I think what we ought to do is step back and take a look at the transitional stage. The transitional stage says that we need to not only look at what worked with Big Mama, but what works now, right? And so that says that we need to learn the methods that these children are using, the lingo, the language. We need to understand those things because, what worked for Big Mama and you and I may not work for them.
Exactly. That is true.
And one thing,
So if I can
sorry,
just add in on piggybacking on Reverend Wallace, there are just certain standards that's never going to change no matter what the generation is. Decency is in all families, and love is with everyone. We all have people close to us. And I know that the overall efforts of what has been was generational for many reasons. But if we really look at it, we didn't have much in the 60s. I remember growing up on the west side of Chicago and living in a very dilapidated building. And, but I had clean clothes. Mother made sure of that. And had food on the table. Could go to school. Didn't have the expensive gym shoes. Didn't have all those little great things that we can now afford for our children. Those things were temporal. But what I've learned, and The reason I am the way I am today, and the reason my children are the way they are today, and my grandchildren, was that I stayed with those values that has proven to be benchmarks of families, and learned them and passed them on, that never has changed. And we who are reverends, we know that. We know that God built families. Families built villages, communities. But God put into families a certain type of standard requirement. And it's written in the scriptures, and old scriptures will find certain things parents are allocated by the Lord to do. And those things don't change. All Big Mama did was practice those values. That's all she did. We always going to have change in generation. The lingo we used yesterday, it's not today. You know, it was cool. I don't know the latest word for cool. What's the interpretation? It's not that we are changed with the temporal that we really want to address in family values. We want to address those things that are standard. And that's very important. Decency and love, morals. 3 weeks ago, there was a report about teenagers beating a man to death and then burning him. And all I could do is ask myself, where are the morals? I mean, that's what we're talking about here. We're not fighting a battle with programs and write-ups of strategies by men. We're fighting a spiritual battle when a person can shoot a child. And I'm a pastor, I'm a servant of Jesus Christ, and I'm always going to be a servant of Jesus Christ. I will say it plainly to anyone. This is a spiritual battle. We're using our knowledge to the limitations that it has to try to find answers. But we need to look at it, what kind of morals and spirit of this person. Family values addresses that. It says you got morals in you. You got a standard in your family that has been passed down. We didn't have all these things. Children today got more affordability than we've ever had, more opportunity than we ever had. And they say, I'm old school. Well, okay, I'm old school, but the fact is, you should have the same morals I have. I should have the same morals my grandparents have. There's certain things that just don't change. So yeah, we should appeal to the new way of communication, but let's not lessen what we have in value, in moral. So yeah.
We have
If
about 5
I
minutes
can,
left.
okay, if I can, I'll take a minute or so. I spoke with a young man not too long ago in regards to what you just said, Pastor Redmond. The young man told me, and that's why I made mention to what I just said not too long ago about how we need to transition. The young man told me he's never met his dad. His mom's been on drugs all his life. His grandmama has funded, as being Big Mama, well over 30-something grandchildren out of her own pocket, right? He's never had anybody to do anything for him. He didn't choose to live in an environment that he lives in, that has overtaken his lifestyle, that has given him challenges in his life. The question that I posed to him, what do you want to do? How do you want to change, right?
Good question. Good question.
I posed that, what do you want to do? And so when you talk in terms of moral, everyone hasn't had the affordability that you and I may have in terms of moral. We haven't been taught that. So he didn't have that, right? His dad's in jail for the rest of his life, even when he was born. Probably never seen his mother to even give him morals, right? Went to school maybe 2 days a week if he went then. And so in terms of morals, we can't place the fact or say that everybody should have. Yeah, we should have, but do we really have it? Let's be realistic. I grew up in a household where my mom and dad was there. I started running the streets at 9 years old. 9. I was Christian based. They taught me that, and they sent me up north to a Caucasian school. I was taught, I was instilled. But the Bible also talks about what you put in a child when they're young, when they get old, therefore won't depart from them. That's how I begin and got where I am today, because those affirmations are still with me. But there was a whole heap of things, a whole heap of challenges that I had to endure getting to this place. And I thank God that it was his hands that brought me through it, because if it was up to us, then I'd probably be in jail the rest of my life or dead. And when I talk in terms
Reverend Wallace, I know that story because you talked about it.
Yeah.
And that is one point you just said that I think we can agree on, that we're talking the same thing. There was something instilled in you. You weren't taught it, but it was there. It wasn't something that a man can teach or you can buy or you can require, even through experience. But there was an innate in you that obviously you had to touch off on. And that was a good thing, because it brought you to become a reverend instead of continuing the life you had once lived. I too was a ruckus. I said I grew up on the West Side in a very dilapidated home, a house, not a home, but a house we lived in. But I had to learn to walk the streets. My brother didn't do as well. He was given the same morals as I was, but he happened to be more street. But there was something in all of us. And I'm just saying that will never leave from generation to generation. And we have it. And I'm thanking God that you and I both found the light and came out of that darkness. And we all can do it. And we're going to lose some now. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying everybody's going to go to heaven or everybody's going to have heaven. That's not a possibility. I'll leave that to Pastor James to explain.
Richard, let me interrupt. Let me jump in here.
30 seconds. I know that's a tall order asking a pastor to stay to 30 seconds, but.
All right. Our last remarks.
Let me say this, Will. I think one of the things is Red one's pointing out. I think one of the things that we have to look at, we run a daycare center here at the church, and I watch and see how many young parents we have here, young parents. One of the things that's happening now, of the generation that we have now, they have young parents. And what Reverend Wiles was saying, and I understand what you're saying, Richard, but the fact is the moral values are not being passed down because they don't share those same value systems. And when the value system does not pass around, a friend of mine once preached a sermon about the transfer that failed to go through. Transfers are transferring from one generation to the next generation. We have a generation now that's not even attached to the church, that don't even know anything about God, don't know anything about the Lord. And as a result, they're being passed down their value system of that generation, which is devoid of Christian values, devoid of some of the morals that you're bringing up. And so if they don't get it from those parents, and you got, it used to be the generation was 20 years. Now that's been reduced to much less than that. So what can a child teach another child? Right. A child raising a child. And so therefore the values that they instill in them is values that they pick up, or values that they draw from other folks around them who are their peers. So those are some of the difficulties that we have. That's why we got to, I think Reverend Hood had mentioned earlier, education. We've got to get toward education about what that really constitutes family values, or proper family values, because they consider those to be their family values. We don't consider them to be good family values, but they are family values. So we've got to try and instill in the hearts and minds of the population what good family values are, and then look at that and utilize that.
Thank you all for your time. We're out of time. I knew it was going to be difficult to keep 5 pastors. No time limits.
Well, you got lucky. We also had control of the mic.
But I thank you all for what you do. A lot of people in the city don't realize how many people are out there on the streets trying to fight the violence problem in our communities. And you all are doing just that with your family value initiative. You all are making Chicago proud. I appreciate you. I'm going to pray for you. I know you all are praying for all of us. We appreciate your prayers. And thank you all for watching at home. This was a great discussion. Take care, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.
All right. Thank WLS. Thank you, Will. Be blessed.